You may have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. This disorder is based on a collection of commonly observed symptoms that negatively affect the lives of people after trauma. But have you heard of post-traumatic growth? In the world of mental health, we have been enjoying a shift toward a more positive and strength-based perspective. We continue to discover more proof that humans are adaptable and resilient. Since the 1950s, mental health experts have expounded on the benefits of building from a foundation of current strengths and abilities. The formal theory of post-traumatic growth emerged in the 1990s, and the main premise is that people who endure psychological struggle following adversity can often see positive growth after. And, of course, this idea has actually been around far longer than the 1990s. Spiritual practices, various faith traditions, and alternate ways of knowing have all emphasized, for centuries, the potential for deep transformation following deep pain. It has long been accepted in many places that when people find meaning in the aftermath of their terrible experiences and find a way to alchemize that pain into something positive for themselves and those around them, that there is a potential for elevated levels of psychological and spiritual functioning. Different cultures have shared different ways they have of transforming pain. A few examples are things like ceremonies, storytelling traditions, practices of deep listening and meditation, sound healing, grief letting, and on and on. And all of these different ways of turning pain into joy, fear into hope is what this podcast is all about. I plan to keep exploring the different tools, ideas, and resources available to do so, both within the scope of the mental health field and beyond. And I want to do that carefully and respectfully, so as part of that, I just want to also keep holding in mind that many of these other cultures have had this information and wisdom for generations and have been systematically silenced from sharing very powerful methods of healing. And at this moment in time, there have been people willing to share their cultural knowledge, and I just think that that calls for a lot of gratitude and humility. So keeping in mind that this concept is kind of built on the resilience of ancient cultures, post-traumatic growth is about letting your trauma change you in positive ways. It is an acknowledgement of the fact that while trauma can be devastating, it can also be a source of profound growth and surprising strength. As I mentioned in the last episode about destigmatizing trauma survival, trauma tends to increase the amount of empathy a person is capable of. It makes sense. They've had a broader range of life experiences and therefore may be able to more easily relate to others who are experiencing intense emotions. A positive relationship has been found between the severity of a person's traumatic experiences and various components of empathy. This really resonates with me. Off and on, I struggle with something called pathological empathy, where you can become debilitated for days about things that are happening to other beings, not even things happening to yourself. And I've definitely come to learn that you need to be able to function or you're not going to be able to help anyone. So I've learned to pull back at times and have energetic boundaries with my empathy, but it's there and sometimes it's intense, and so many times it was clear that I was having a different experience than the people around me. I definitely think it's a strength with my therapy practice and my life coaching practice. I feel like I'm in the right line of work with this trait. So just remember that there is a place for your sensitive little bunny soul. And this increased empathy and capacity for connection to other human beings is an example of post-traumatic growth. Trauma survival has also been linked to other prosocial behaviors. These prosocial behaviors seem to primarily revolve around having compassion toward and a willingness to help disadvantaged groups. This may be because trauma has been linked to reduced in-group bias and, again, increased perspective taking of others. A few other examples of post-traumatic growth are the ways that trauma can lead to self-enhancement or development, character growth, and a deeper relationship with oneself. This is one of my favorite things to introduce clients to because I know how life-changing this mindset shift about trauma is. When I first heard of the idea of post-traumatic growth, it absolutely blew my mind and gave me so much hope. It also made a lot of sense. I felt like I had been experiencing this phenomenon for years at that point. I certainly had my struggles with my mental health, but I had managed to do a lot, and I did often have this feeling that I was so lucky to have survived my childhood and turned out the way I did. I thought I was this crazy outlier, but now I see it differently. I think there are tons of people out there who have managed to turn their struggling into something better. If we think of trauma as a spectrum and something very subjective and personal for each individual, then we've all had something that has hurt us and we've had to figure out what to do with that pain. So I think that this is a human characteristic that people experience to varying degrees, sometimes directly proportionate to the extent of their trauma. And before we continue, just in case it needs to be said, no part of me presenting this concept is intended to invalidate anyone's trauma or give any perpetrators of violence a pass. It's not meant to say that it's good that something traumatic happened to anyone. Most things that traumatize people should never have happened. And if you're listening to this and you've experienced one of those things, I'm so sorry. I just want to guide you over to an idea that might help you take back your experience of this life. If you're not ready, I think that that's okay, but if you are ready, here are a few strategies for getting from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. Number 1, practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness has sort of become a part of pop culture, which is both a blessing and a curse. You've probably heard of it at this point, and maybe you think of sitting on a yoga mat, meditating. Love that, but mindfulness can actually be done anywhere, anytime. It's literally just the act of bringing all of your attention to the present moment. This is often done using the 5 senses, noticing things that you can see, smell, taste, hear, and feel. It can also be done using strategies that help you feel into your body. So anything that helps remind you that you are in your body in this time and place can be used as part of a mindfulness practice. This is very grounding and helps to remind you where you are and that you are not currently experiencing the trauma. Number 2, developing a spiritual practice. Listen, I know this is loaded these days for so many reasons. And you know I am interested in religion, theology, and spirituality, so we'll definitely explore some of these reasons in future episodes. But for now, I will just say that if you have felt any disconnect or have been traumatized by organized religion, just consider allowing yourself to reclaim your faith and imagine what it could look like outside of that organized religion. Having a spiritual practice can be incredibly grounding and brings a sense of peace. Spirituality has been directly linked to post-traumatic growth. Spiritual resources like prayer or meditation and the feeling of connecting to something greater than yourself can cultivate self-soothing and an increased capacity to cope. It often helps with meaning making around the trauma and can bolster the feeling of reclaiming power after a traumatic incident. If you're having trouble with this idea, I would suggest starting with anything that resonates with you around feeling connected to others and attuned to the good in the world, and just try to see where your intuition takes you. Number 3, processing the trauma. I'm not gonna lie, this one is a doozy. Processing trauma involves making some sense of how and why it happened, and also contextualizing it, putting it into the place it belongs in your past, and taking some of the emphasis that your brain has put onto the experience out of it. This happens on several levels, often with the help of a professional if that is available to you. Mentally, it can include contextualizing cultural factors, family dynamics, intergenerational patterns, etc. Physically, it might mean trying out something like EMDR to support yourself in reprocessing the bodily sensations associated with the trauma, or developing a secure relationship with your body as you release tension and stretch the fascia. Spiritually, it might mean grappling with how this happened, how this experience might shape or change your belief system, and making meaning of this experience. Number 4. Reading books. Gaining new perspectives can be so useful in the process of healing from trauma. There are a lot out there, and you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Learn why you do the things that you do and seek out information that will help you. And number 5, building gratitude for the life you live and the person you are. Gratitude is so powerful, which is why it's on every list about improving your life. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. That's just a fact at this point. There's certainly a time and place to focus on what happened to you. See number 3. Set aside that time, then, using mindfulness, return to your present life. Build your practice of actually taking the time to let deep gratitude soak into the fiber of your being for where you are and what you have. There are a lot more things you could do that I'm sure we'll talk about over time, but if you commit to practicing these 5 things, I feel pretty confident that you will experience a significant shift toward post-traumatic growth. That's all for today. Thank you for being here, and I'll meet you here next time on Reimagining Ourselves.